The COVID-19 pandemic has been a time of increased stress for nearly everyone. During a crisis like this, we are more likely to be exposed to painful and even traumatic experiences. Essential workers, people living in poverty, and those with underlying health conditions are especially vulnerable at this time. Much is out of our control, and although we may feel powerless in the face of overwhelming or tragic events, there are actions people can take to recover. We have outlined a few of those strategies here. First, I'll discuss what is normal when it comes to trauma and grief, and how to tell whether you are experiencing problems that require professional help. Then, I'll review one of 4 skills that can help you manage trauma and grief on a day-to-day basis. First, what is trauma and how does it affect us? Trauma is a widely used term with many different meanings. Mental health professionals use the word trauma to describe experiences where a person suddenly and unexpectedly watches someone die, becomes a victim of violence, or experiences a natural disaster, accident, or other tragic event. Traumatized people can experience a number of symptoms. These include flashbacks, nightmares, or intrusive thoughts about the event. They may also feel anxious or irritable. They may have trouble remembering the event or have difficulty concentrating, and may temporarily lose touch with reality. Next, what is grief? Grief refers to the experience of mourning that often follows the loss of a loved one, regardless of whether their death occurred in a traumatic way. There is no right or normal way to grieve. People experience a wide variety of negative emotions when grieving, including anger, anxiety, apathy, fear, helplessness, guilt, loneliness, numbness, or uncertainty. They also may experience positive emotions, such as gratitude that the person who has died is no longer suffering. Someone who's grieving may have trouble concentrating or making decisions. They may experience crying spells, difficulty sleeping, excessive tiredness, health problems, and social isolation. As with trauma, experiencing these symptoms is not necessarily a sign that something is wrong or that the person requires treatment. Finally, what are the signs that we might need more help? Symptoms for both trauma and grief are common for several weeks after experiencing a traumatic event or loss. It's just how our brains and bodies respond. But if trauma or grief symptoms persist for months after the traumatic event or loss, and you are struggling to work or function in your relationships, it may be time to think about reaching out for professional help. One of the most common ways to find help is to work with a psychologist or psychiatrist or join a local therapy or support group. On the Guide for Finding Resources page of our website, you'll find phone numbers and web addresses for different mental health resources where you can seek professional help for trauma or grief. Now that we know a bit more about trauma and grief, I'll review the strategy of practicing balanced thinking, which can help anyone manage these emotions. Note that you will find descriptions of 3 other strategies on our website. It's normal to have negative thoughts after a traumatic event or loss. You may think, "I wish that had not happened to me," or "I'm afraid that this is going to happen again." These thoughts are normal and may even help you express strong emotions or figure out what you need to do to heal. Unfortunately, negative thoughts can also be inaccurate or unhelpful. Thoughts like, "It's all my fault that this happened," or "I am a terrible person for not doing more to prevent this," could ruin our mood and make us less productive and more likely to cut ourselves off from others. One way to help yourself create more balanced thinking is to challenge a negative thought. Let's walk through an example of how you can do this together. Step 1 is to try to identify a specific thought that is accompanying a negative emotion. Let's take the example of a major earthquake that did a lot of damage to your house. You may be feeling sad or angry. And you might even start telling yourself very negative things, telling yourself that it's all your fault that the house sustained so much damage, or that you should have done a lot more to prevent that. Step 2 would be to consider the evidence for and the evidence against that thought. Evidence for that thought might be that you had planned to retrofit the house but didn't get around to it in time. Evidence against that thought might include that you did everything that you could control, including bolting the furniture to the walls, for instance. More evidence against that thought might be that almost all of the houses in the neighborhood sustained significant damage in the earthquake. Step 3 would be to think about whether you are missing important information about the situation. Taking this information into account might help you find alternative and more helpful ways of thinking about the situation. In this case, it might be true that even if you had retrofitted the house, that the earthquake still would have caused very significant damage regardless. Step 4 is, based on the questions you asked yourself in the previous steps, try to come up with a more balanced thought that takes all of the evidence into account. In our example, you might tell yourself that this was a very serious earthquake, and while there were some things that you wish that you had done previous to the earthquake, that ultimately natural disasters happen and that they're out of our control. Remember, we have little, if any, control over what thoughts come into our mind, but we do have control over how we respond to them. Responding using the 4 steps that we just discussed typically helps people feel a bit better about the situation and can serve as important practice for the next time something bad happens. This is a very stressful time, with many members of our community experiencing traumatic events and intense grief. If you are experiencing this type of stress, we hope that you will find some relief by practicing the 4 skills highlighted in this segment of the COVID-19 care package. If you need additional help, please reach out for professional support, either through your normal care provider or by using the links provided on the Guide to Resources page. Don't forget to check out the other components of the COVID-19 care package. We're sharing strategies that can help you lift your mood, ease anxiety, and manage depression during COVID-19. If you're interested, you can sign up on the site to receive alerts as we post new information.